The narrative regarding Narcissus is a fitting one, illustrating the tale of a young man who daily knelt beside a lake to admire his own allure. He was so entranced by his reflection that ultimately he fell into the water and drowned. At the sight of his demise, a flower was said to bloom named the Narcissus. However, this is not the version provided by the book's author. According to the narrative, upon Narcissus' death, the forest goddesses arrived and discovered that the once freshwater lake had transformed into a salty body of tears. "Why do you cry?" the goddesses inquired. "I grieve for Narcissus," the lacquer responded. "It is no wonder you lament for him," they replied, "for we continually chase him through woods, only you could witness his beauty up close." The lake was questioned about Narcissus' attractiveness. The goddesses pondered, realizing that it was by the water's edge where he knelt to admire his own reflection. After a moment of silence, the lake finally confessed, "I mourned for Narcissus not because he was beautiful but because each time he knelt by my banks I could perceive my own beauty mirrored in the depths of his eyes." That's a captivating tale found within The Alchemist. Part 1. The boy's name was Santiago. As dusk descended, he arrived at a deserted church with his flock. The roof had long since collapsed, and a massive sycamore tree had taken root where a sacristy once stood. He decided to spend a night there, ensuring the sheep entered a room through the gate before laying some planks across the gap to prevent the flock from straying overnight. There were no wolves in that area, only animals that might wander at night. The boy knew he would spend the entirety of the next day searching for any lost sheep. He swept the floor with his jacket and lay down using the book he had just finished as a pillow. He told himself he would need to start picking thicker books as they lasted longer and made for cozier pillows. When he awoke, it was still dark and hell looked up to see the stars of the partially collapsed roof. "I want to sleep a bit longer," he thought. That night he had the same dream as before, waking up once again just before it concluded. Rising, he grabbed his staff and began to rouse a sheep that were still slumbering. He noticed that as soon as he stirred, most of his animals began to awaken, as well as a mysterious energy connected his life to theirs after spending 2 years leading them to the countryside in search of food and water. They had grown accustomed to his presence. He quietly remarked that they were aware of his timetable, and after a moment's reflection, it dawned on him that the situation might actually be reversed. He had become attuned to their routine. However, some of them required a little extra time to awaken. The boy gently nudged them one by one with this substance. Each was called by name. He always held the belief that the sheep could comprehend his words. There were occasions when he would recite passages from his books that left a mark on him or share tales of the solitude and joy of a shepherd in the fields. Occasionally, he would recount all the sights he had observed in the village he traversed. Recently, though, his conversations had centered on just one topic. A girl, the daughter of a merchant from the village they would arrive at in roughly 4 days. He had only visited that village once. A year earlier, the merchant owned a dry goods store and insisted on having the sheep presented to him to avoid any dishonesty in transactions. A friend had informed the boy about the shop and had taken his sheep there. "I need to sell some wool," he told the merchant. The shop bustled with activity and the man asked the shepherd to wait until the afternoon. As a result, the boy settled on the steps off the store and retrieved a book from his bag. "I didn't realize shepherds could read," came a girl's voice from behind him. She was a typical and illusion girl with flowing black hair and eyes that vaguely mirrored nearby Moorish architecture. "Usually I learn more from my sheep than I do from books," he replied. During the 2 hours they conversed, she introduced herself as a merchant's daughter and spoke about life in a village where every day seemed to blend into the next. The shepherd told her about the Andalusian landscape and shared news from the other towns. It was a delightful shift from his usual discussions. She mentioned wanted to learn to read just like everyone else does in school, she remarked. "Well, if you can't read, why are you just a shepherd?" The boy mumbled a response that allowed him to dodge her question, convinced that she would never grasp the truth. He continued sharing tales of his adventures, and as he spoke, he noticed her bright Moorish eyes widen in fear and astonishment. As time slipped away, he found himself hoping that the day would never conclude, and that her father would remain preoccupied, keeping him waiting. Over the course of 3 days, he realized he was experiencing a feeling he had never known before. The longing to settle in one place forever alongside the girl with the raven. The days would never feel the same again. But at last, the merchant arrived and asked the boy to share the sheep he had purchased for the wall. He requested the shepherd to return the following year. Now only 4 days remained until he would arrive back in that same village. Excitement and unease coursed through him. Perhaps the girl had forgotten about him. Countless shepherds came and went, and he realized that it didn't matter. He was aware of girls in other towns, but deep down he understood that it truly had no significance. Shepherds, like wandering salespeople, always found a place where someone could make them forget the pleasures of carefree traveling. As dawn broke, the shepherd guided his sheep towards the sun. They never faced a burden off Jesus. He thought perhaps that was why they remained close to him. Their only concerns revolve around food and water, and as long as the boy could locate the best pastures in Andalusia, they would remain as companions. Yes, their daily routine was monotonous, with seemingly endless hours between sunrise and sunset. They had never picked up a book in their lives and did not comprehend the tales the boy shared about city sights. They were satisfied with merely food and water. In return, they generously provided companionship. He pondered that if he were to turn monstrous today and begin slaying them one by one, it would only be after most of the flock had been slaughtered that the boy would understand their trust. They forgot how to pen on their instincts because he had been leading them to pasture, nursing Theons a surprise. Perhaps the church with the sycamore from which his dreams originated was indeed cursed, causing him to have the same dream again and stirring anger towards his loyal companions. He sipped a bit of the wind left over from his previous night's dinner and pulled his jacket tighter around him. He was aware that in just a few hours, with the sun reaching its peak, the heat would become unbearable, making it impossible for him to guide his flock through the fields. This was a time of day when all of Spain took rest during the summer, with the heat lingering until night fell. Throughout that time he had to carry his jacket, yet he made no complaint about his weight. He recalled that because he had the jacket, he had endured the morning chill. He needed to prepare for change and thought and felt thankful for the jacket's warmth and weight. It served a purpose. The boy's ambition in life revolved around exploration. And after 2 years traversing the Andalusian landscape, he had become familiar with all the cities within the region. He intended to share with the girl how it was that ordinary shepherds could read, mentioning that he spent time in seminary until he was 16. As his parents aspired for him to become a priest, a source of pride for their simple farming family. They worked diligently just to ensure it was food and water similar to their sheep, even as he studied Latin, Spanish, and theology. However, from a young age he had yearned to experience the world, a pursuit he valued more than a knowledge of God or an understanding of humanity's essence. One afternoon during a visit with Hi's family, he mustered the courage to express to his father his wish not to become a priest, but rather to journey out into the world. People pass through this village, his father told him. They come seeking novelty, but when they depart, they leave as the same individuals they were upon arrival. They climb the mountain to witness the castle and often reflect that the past was better than the present. Whether they possess blonde hair or dark skin, they are fundamentally similar to the people living here. But I wish to see the castles and towns of those people, the boy countered, explaining that visitors taught their land often remarked on a desire to stay forever. His father replied, I would also like to witness their lands and learn how they live. The individuals who come here have wealth to spare, allowing them to travel. But among us most truly desired roam, every shepherd will remain a shepherd. The following day, his father gifted him 3 Spanish gold coins he discovered in the fields. Initially intended as part of his inheritance, use these to purchase a flock, take them to the fields, and learn that our countryside is the finest with women of remarkable beauty, he advised, offering his blessing. In his father's eyes, the boy could sense a lingering desire for travel, a wish still vibrant despite a lifetime of struggle for basic necessities. As the horizon glowed red and the sun rose, the boy reminisced about that conversation with his father, feeling a surge of happiness. He had already encountered numerous castles and met various women, yet none compared to the one awaited him in just a few days. To Jack, a book he could exchange for another and a group of sheep. But most importantly, he was able to live his dream daily. If he grew weary of the Andalusian landscapes, he could sell a sheep and go see the sea. By the time he hadn't the ocean, he would have already explored new cities and met different women, experiencing other opportunities for happiness. He couldn't have discovered God in the seminary. He sought the sunrise whenever he could, looking for a new path to explore. Despite having traveled through that region numerous times, he had never visited those ancient ruins. The world was vast and endless, allowing him to let his sheep guide him for a while. Ash found other intriguing sights. The issue was that they weren't even aware they were walking a different path each day. They failed to notice the fields renewed with each changing season. Their thoughts revolved solely around food and water. Perhaps we all share that mindset. The boys did, including myself. I hadn't considered other women since meeting the merchant's daughter. Gazing at his son, he calculated he would reach the town before noon, where he could trade his book for a larger one, refill his wine bottle, and enjoy a pleasant meal. He needed to prepare for his encounter with the girls, not to dwell on the fear that some other shepherd with a larger flock might arrive before him and seek her hand. It was a potential for dreams come fruition that added excitement to life. He thought, glancing once more at the sun's position and quickening his pace. Suddenly, he recalled that in the town there was an elderly woman who interpreted dreams. The old woman guided the boy to a room at the back of her home, separated from the living space by a curtain of colored beads. The room contained a table, an image of the Sacred Heart of Jesus, and 2 chairs. The woman sat and gestured for him to join her. Then she took both of his hands into hers and began a quiet chant which resembled a gypsy prayer. That boy had encountered gypsies on his travels. They also journeyed but lacked flocks of sheep. People claimed that gypsies live by deceiving others. And it was rumored they had a pack of the devil kidnapping children and taking them to mysterious camps to enslave them. As a child, he had been terrified that he might be captured by gypsies, and now that childhood fear resurfaced as the old woman grasped his hand. However, with the image of the Sacred Heart of Jesus nearby, he tried to reassure himself not want his hand to betray him by trembling in front of her. The woman observed him closely and quietly recited the Lord's Prayer, feeling an air of uneasiness. Intrigued, she maintained her gaze on the boy's hands before lapsing into silence. The boy's anxiety grew, causing his hands to quiver, prompting him to swiftly withdraw them. "I didn't come here for you to read my palm," he declared, already feeling remorse for his visit. For a moment he considered it wiser to pay her and leave without acquiring any insights, realizing he was attributing excessive significance to his recurring dream. "So you could discover the meanings of your dreams," stated the old woman, remarking that dreams serve as a divine language to which God communicates. "I can decipher his messages, but should he express himself in the language of the soul, only you can grasp that." Nonetheless, she insisted on charging for consultation, which the boy considered yet another trick. However, he resolved to be bold, as a shepherd must take risks against wolves and drought, which contributes to the thrill of a profession. "I've had the same dream on 2 occasions," he shared in it. "I find myself in a field with Miflock when a child appears play with the animals. I'm uneasy with this. Strangers frighten the sheep, yet children always manage to engage them without instilling fear. I'm not sure why that is or how animals perceive a human ages." "Tell me more about your dream," urged the woman. "I have to return to my cooking, and since your funds are limited, I cannot spare much time." "The child has played with my sheep for quite a while," the boy continued, slightly perturbed. "Suddenly the child grasped my hands and transported me to the Egyptian pyramids." He paused briefly to gauge her recognition of these landmarks, but she remained silent. "At the Egyptian pyramids," he articulated the phrase deliberately, ensuring she understood. "The child told me, if you come here you'll uncover the hidden treasure." Just as the child began to indicate the exact location, I awakened both times. The woman remained quiet for a while. Eventually she took his hands again and scrutinized them closely. "I won't charge you anything now," she stated, "but I want a tent of treasure if you succeed in finding it." The boy chuckled in joy, realizing he might retain his savings due to a dream about concealed riches. "Well, interpret the dream then," he insisted. "First, swear to me that you will give me 1/10 of your treasure in exchange for what I'm about to reveal." The shepherd took an oath without hesitation. Would end his life and urge him to vow again while gazing at the depiction of the Sacred Heart of Jesus. "It's an aspiration articulated in worldly terms," she explained. "I can decipher it. Yet the decoding is quite challenging. This is precisely why I believe I deserve percentage of what you uncover. Within my insights you are to head towards the pyramids. I have never encountered them, yet if it were a child who revealed them to you, they surely exist there. You will discover a fortune that will enrich you." The youth was taken back and then became annoyed. "You must seek the elderly woman for assistance with this." But then he recalled that he would have to compensate her. "I didn't want to squander my time for this." Here marked, "I informed you that your dream is complex. It is the uncomplicated aspect of life that are most remarkable. Only the sagacious can grasp this, and as I lack wisdom I have had to acquire other abilities such as dream interpretation. Well, how will I obtain the treasure? I merely interpret dreams. I am not equipped to actualize them. Therefore I rely on what my daughters have given me. And what if I never make it to Egypt and I don't receive any payment? I've experienced this before." The woman instructed the boy to leave, asserting she had already expended too much time on him. Thus the boy felt disheartened. He resolved that he would no longer place faith in dreams. He recalled several tasks needed his attention. Once he visited the marketplace in search of food. Among other items, his book that was larger caught his eye, and he spotted a bench in the square where he could take a break. The day was warm and the breeze was delightful. The sheep were located at the city gates within a stable owned by a friend. The boy encountered many individuals in the city, making travel enticing to him. He consistently made friends and didn't have to devote all his moments to them. When one sees same faces regularly as he did in seminary, they gradually become integrated into that person's existence, and then they wish for the individual to alter. If someone does not conform to what others desire, the others grow upset. Everyone appears to possess a clear notion of how individuals ought to conduct their lives except for their own. He resolved to bide his time until the sun declined a bit further before guides flocked back to the fields. In 3 days he would be with the merchant's daughter. He began to study the book. You will find right on the first page, describing the burial ceremony, and the names of those involved proved to be quite challenging to pronounce. If he ever needed assistance, he would introduce one individual at a time, ensuring the reader wouldn't have to struggle with memorizing numerous names, allowing him to finally focus on the text. He found the book more enjoyable. The burial took place on a wintry day, and he embraced a chill as he read on. An elderly man settled next to him and attempted to initiate a dialogue. "What are they doing?" the old man queried, gesturing at the individuals in the plaza. The boy replied curtly, making it clear he preferred to focus on his reading, though in reality he was contemplating sharing his sheep in front of the merchant's daughter to demonstrate that he was capable of accomplishing challenging tasks. He had envisioned that moment countless times. Every time the girl appeared captivated when he explained how the sheep needed to be sheared from the back to the front. He also tried to recall some interesting anecdotes about sheep shearing, most of which he had read in books, but would narrate as if they were drawn from his personal experiences. She would never discern the difference as she was not literate. Meanwhile, the old man continued in his efforts to engage the boy in conversation, expressing fatigue and thirst and asking for a sip from the boy's bottle. Hoping the old man would leave him in peace, the boy offered his bottle. However, the old man was intent on conversing and inquired about the book the boy was reading. The boy felt inclined to be rude and shift to another bench, but remembered his father's teachings on showing respect to the elderly. Therefore, he held out the book to the old man for two reasons. First, he himself was uncertain how to pronounce the title, and second, the old man, unable to read, would likely feel embarrassed. Change benches, the old man suggested, examining all sides of book as if it were an odd artifact. This is an important book, but it's really irritating, said the old man, who revealed he had already read it. Hess stated that the book was tedious, indicating that the boys still had the opportunity to swap it for another. It's a book that reiterates what nearly every other book in the world conveys, continued the old man, elaborating that it illustrated humanity's struggle to pursue their own personal legends, and concluded by asserting that everyone is ensnared by the greatest deception of all. What is the world's greatest lie? The boy inquired, taken aback by this notion. In our lives, we frequently lose control over what transpires, becoming subject to the whims of fate. This tops the list of the greatest deceptions in the world. That has never occurred to me, said the boy. They wish for me to become a priest, but I opted to be a shepherd instead. That's much wiser, replied the old man, since you truly have a passion for wandering. He understood the thoughts racing through the boy's mind. The boy reflected himself as the old man flipped through the book, seemingly reluctant to part with it. The boy observed that the man's attire appeared peculiar, reminiscent of a storm's aftermath, which wasn't uncommon in those regions. Africa lay just a few hours away from Tarifa, where both of his parents frequently ventured into the city for shopping, reciting the unusual prayer multiple times throughout the day. Where do you hail from? The boy inquired. From various places, the man replied. One cannot originate from numerous locations, the boy insisted. I'm a shepherd and have traveled extensively, but I belong to one particular place, a town near an ancient castle where I was born. Let's just say I was born in Salem, the old man remarked. The boy wasn't familiar with Salem but hesitated to ask, fearing it would signal his naivete. He observed the bustling crowd in the plaza for a moment. They were coming and going, busy with their lives. What is Salem like? He tried to glean. It remains as it has always been. No hints revealed themselves, but the boy sensed that Salem wasn't located in Andalusia. Had it been, he would have been aware of it, and what he'd do in Salem, he pressed. What do I do in Salem? The old man chuckled. I am the king of Salem. The boy mused that people often utter strange statements. At times it felt more comforting to be with the silent sheep or find solace alone with books. Books share captivating narratives from times that linger in your thoughts yet converse with others, often led to bewildering exchanges. My name is Melchizedek DC, announced the old man. How many sheep do you possess? Sufficient, the boy replied, sensing the old man's curiosity in his life. Well, then we have a predicament. I can assist you if you feel content with your sheep. The boy grew frustrated. He wasn't seeking assistance. The old man, however, requested a drink of his wine and initiated the conversation. Give me my book, the boy instructed. I must gather my sheep and be on my way. Offer me 1/10 of your sheep, proposed the old man, and I will reveal to you how to unearth the hidden treasure. The boy recalled his dreams and aspirations. He dreamt, and suddenly everything became apparent to him. The old woman had demanded something, but the old man, perhaps her husband, would seek a way to obtain much more money in exchange for information about something that didn't even exist. The man might have also been a gypsy. Before the boy could speak, the old man leaned down, grabbed a stick, and began to scrub the sand in the plaza. A bright glint caught the boy's eye from the man's chest, dazzling him temporarily. With a swift movement atypical for someone his age, the man covered whatever was with his case. Once the boy's vision adjusted, he deciphered the old man's writing in the sand. In the small city's plaza, he saw the names of his parents and the seminary he attended. He even recognized the merchant's daughter's name, which he had never mentioned to anyone. I am the king of Salem, the old man had stated while conversing with the shepherd. Feeling embarrassed for several reasons, particularly because Hugh was uncertain what a personal legend was, the boy listened. It's what you have always aspired to achieve, the old man explained. Everyone when young starts with their personal legend in mind. At that stage, everything is transparent and all things are achievable. They're unafraid to dream, and to each individual there exists a wish for what changes they aspire to see unfold in their lives. Yet as time moves forward, an enigmatic force starts to persuade them that achieving their personal legend may be out of reach. The old man's words held much relevance to the boy, who yearned to uncover the nature of this mysterious force. The merchant's daughter would certainly be intrigued to hear him speak of it. This force may seem negative at first, but in reality it guides you toward fulfilling your personal legend, preparing your spirit for the journey ahead. There's a profound truth on this planet. No matter who you are or what your pursuits entail, the reason you desire something is that such a yearning springs from the universe's very essence. Your purpose on earth reveals itself. Whether your aspirations are to travel the world or marry the daughter of a textile merchant or even embark on a treasure hunt, the universe's soul finds sustenance in both joy and sorrow. And pursuing one's personal legend constitutes a pivotal obligation for each person. All existence is interconnected. and when you truly desire something, the universe conspires to assist you in achieving it. They both remained quiet for a while, observing the plaza and its inhabitants until the old man broke the silence. What motivates you to care for the flock of sheep? He asked. Because I love to travel, replied the boy. The old man gestured toward a larger item displayed in a shop window at one corner of the plaza, something the boy had long wished to explore during his childhood. He had resolved to first establish his bakery and save some money, planning to spend a month in Africa when he grew old. People often overlook that anyone can at any moment in their lives pursue their dreams. You should have chosen to be a shepherd, the boy suggested. Well, that crossed my mind, the old man admitted. But bakers hold more significance than shepherds. Bakers have homes, while shepherds must sleep outdoors. Parents prefer to see their children marry bakers instead of shepherds. A wave of sadness washed over the boy at the thought of the merchant's daughter, who would undoubtedly become a baker. The old man continued, emphasizing that in the end, what people think about shepherds and beggars often takes precedence over their own personal legends. The old man then seized the book and began reading a page, with the boy waiting patiently, until he finally interrupted the old man just as he had himself been interrupted. You tell me this because you are striving to fulfill your personal legend, and thighs is the moment when you are about to relinquish it all. That's when I tend to appear, not always in the same manner, but I show up in various forms. Occasionally I manifest a solution. At times it's wise to seize a moment to facilitate opportunities. I engage in various activities, though most remain unnoticed by others. The elder recounted a tale from the week before when he had to present himself as a stone to a miner who had forsaken everything for years in pursuit of emeralds, having dedicated 5 years to a particular river and unearthing countless stones. Just as the miner was about to abandon his quest, he was on the brink of discovering the emerald with the examination of just one more stone. The old man, recognizing the miner's dedication to his personal legend, chose to intervene. He transformed himself into a stone that rolled to the miner's feet. Fueled by the frustration and anger over 5 fruitless years, the miner picked up a stone and cast it away with such intensity that it shattered, revealing the most exquisite emerald embedded within. The old man expressed with a hint of bitterness that people often discover their purpose early in life, possibly leading them to abandon it prematurely. That's simply how it goes. The boy reminded the old man about his reference to hidden treasure, to which the elder replied that treasure surfaces through the flow of water, yet is also concealed by the very same currents. If the boy wishes to discover his treasure, he must offer 1/10 of his flock. The boy questioned the notion of giving away a portion of his anticipated treasure. The old man's disappointment was evident as he cautioned that if one begins by promising what they lack, they may lose the drive to obtain it. The boy then mentioned he had already promised 1/10 of his treasure to the gypsy, whom the elder remarked were skilled at persuading others. Regardless, it's important to recognize that everything in life comes at a cost, a lesson taught by the warriors of light. The old man returned the book to the boy, instructing him to bring 1/10 his flock the next day, and he would reveal how to locate the treasure. With that, he disappeared around the corner of the plaza. The boy resumed reading his book, but his focus wavered, feeling tense and disturbed. Acknowledging the truth in the old man's words, he went to the bakery and bought a loaf of bread, contemplating whether to share his thoughts with the baker before deciding that sometimes it's best to leave matters unchanged. Say nothing if Hugh or utter anything. Rebecca would spend 3 days contemplating giving it all up. Even though he had adapted to his situation, the boy could certainly avert causing that level of anxiety. So he started to venture toward the city and arrived at the gates. There was a small structure there with a window where people purchased tickets to Africa, and he understood that Egypt was part of Africa. "Can I assist you?" asked the man. "Behind the window, maybe tomorrow," replied the boy as he walked away. If he managed to sell just one of his fish, he would quickly gather enough money. The notion of spending. Another dreamer commented the ticket seller to his assistant, observing the boy retreat. "He doesn't possess enough money for travel." While at the ticket window, the boy recalled his flock and resolved to return to being shepherd. Over the course of 2 years, he had acquired extensive knowledge about shepherding. He knew how to shear sheep, how to tend a pregnant ewe, and how to safeguard the flock from wolves. He was familiar with all the fields and patches of Andalusia, and he understood the fair price for each of his animals. He opted to take the longest route back to his friend's stable. As he strolled, he passed the city's castle, which interrupted his journey, and ascended the stone ramp that led to the top of the wall. From that vantage point, he could see Africa in the distance. Someone had once told him that it was from there that the Moors had invaded all of Spain. You could nearly see the entire city from where he perched, including the plaza where he conversed with the old man. He cursed at a moment he encountered that old man. He thought he had come to town on Lido to discover a woman who could interpret his dream. Not that the old man was at all impressed by the fact that he was a shepherd. They were solitary souls who had long abandoned belief in things and failed to grasp that shepherds grew attached to their sheep. He knew everything about each member of his flock. He was aware of which were lame, which would bear young months from now, and which were the laziest. He could shear them and how to slaughter them. If ever he chose to depart, they would suffer. The wind began to rise. He understood that when people referred to it as the love wine because the Moors had originated from the Levant at the eastern edge of the Mediterranean, the love wind intensified here. I am between my flock and my treasure. The boy thought he was faced with a choice between what he had grown used to and what he desired. There was also the merchant's daughter, but she did not hold the same importance as Ashi's flock since she was not reliant. Perhaps she didn't even recall him, yet he was convinced that it made no difference to her. Each day remained the same image for her, a reflection that never changed because individuals often overlook the positive occurrences in their daily lives. With every sunrise, I left behind my father, my mother, and the town of Castle. They had adapted to my absence, and I had too. She would eventually become accustomed to my absence as well. From his vantage point, the boy observed the plaza where people continuously moved in and out of the bakery. A young couple lingered on a bench, exchanging words while he conversed previously with the elderly gentleman and shared a kiss. The boy mused himself, trailing off in thought. The wind, growing stronger, brushed against his face, having brought with it hints of the moors, yet also carried the scent of the desert and fields. It brought along the sweat and the aspirations of those from the Midwest who once yearned for Thunon, for riches, for adventure, and for the pyramids. He envied the wind's freedom, realizing that he could also attain such liberty. Nothing restrained him except his own limitations. The sheep, the merchant's daughter, and the Andalusian fields were merely steps along his path towards realizing his personal legend. The following day, the boy encountered the old man who had arrived with 6 sheep. In astonishment, the boy observed that his friend had purchased all the remaining sheep. The old man declared that he had always aspired to be a shepherd, viewing this as an auspicious sign. That's how it usually goes, the old man remarked, referring to the principle of favorability. When you first play cards, you're almost certain to win. It's called beginner's luck. Why does this happen? There's a force that desires for you to fulfill your personal legend and to give you a taste of success. The old man began examining the sheep and noticed one that was lying down. The boy explained that this sheep was significant, being the most intelligent of flock and producing the most wool. Where's the treasure? The old man inquired. It's near the pier, the boy replied, taken aback because an old woman had conveyed the same message to him without any cost. To discover the treasure, you must heed the omens. God has crafted a path for everyone. You just need to recognize the amends he has laid out for you. Before the boy could respond, a butterfly flitted between him and the old man, reminding him of something his grandfather had once shared. Butterflies are good omens, just like crickets, grasshoppers, lizards, and 4-leaf clovers. That's correct, he affirmed. The elderly man possessed the ability to perceive the boy's thoughts, reminiscent of lessons from your grandfather. He remarked that these moments are indeed precious. The old man opened his cake and the boy was astonished by what he beheld. Men adorned in breastplates of heavy gold encrusted with jewels. Thebai recalled a dazzling sight he had observed the day before. He truly was a king. To prevent unwanted interactions, the old man advised to stay in disguise. He presented 2 stones, one white and one black, embedded in the breastplate center. These stones were known as marine domain. The black denoted dies while the white indicated no. In moment of uncertainty, these stones would assist in interpreting omens. Always pose an objective question, yet if possible, strive to make your own choices regarding the treasures off pyramids. You already know of my insistence on the payment of 6 sheep for guiding your decision-making process. Boy stored the stones in his pouch, vowing to make his own choice moving forward. Remember that everything you engage in holds only one significance. Do not forget the language of omens. Above all, stay committed to pursuing your personal legend until its fulfillment before departing. He shared a story concerning the quest for the secret happiness. Learn from the wisest man in existence. This sage journeyed into the desert for 40 days, ultimately discovering a splendid castle perched on a mountain. It was there that the wise man resided. Upon entering the grand room, rather than encountering a pious figure, he found a flurry of activity, merchants traversing the space, lively conversations occurring, a small orchestra providing gentle music, and a table laid with a feast delight uniquito that region. The wise man engaged at everyone, and the boy anxiously awaited his turn for 2 hours. When finally granted an audience, the sage attentively listened to the boy's purpose for his visit and expressed he had the time to disclose the secret of happiness shortly. He advised the boy to examine the palace and returned in 2 hours. Meanwhile, he handed him a teaspoon containing 2 drops of oil, instructing him to carry it as he explored without spilling any. The boy began to navigate the numerous stairways off the palace, keeping his gaze fixed on the spoon. After the 2 hours elapsed, he returned to the Weissman's room, well past the time allocated. It took the master gardener a decade to produce the exquisite apartments found in my library. The boy felt embarrassed and admitted that he hadn't noticed anything. His only focus had been on the spilled oil that the wise man had given him. Return and appreciate the wonders of my world, instructed the wise man. You cannot truly know a man until you have seen his home. The boy, feeling relieved, grasped the spoon and resumed his journey through the palace, this time taking in all the artistic masterpieces adorning the ceilings and walls. He noticed the gardens, the surrounding mountains, the vibrant blossoms, and the thoughtful selection of every detail. Upon his return, the wise man, he recounted everything he had observed. But the wise man questioned, "What happened to the drops of oil I entrusted to you?" Looking down at the spoon, the boy realized the oil was no longer there. "I can only offer you one piece of advice," the wisest of wise men stated. "The key to happiness lies in recognizing all the wonders of the world while also remembering the drops of oil on spoon." The shepherd said nothing but understood this important lesson. The king instructed Ashipurd, who enjoyed wandering but should never neglect his responsibility. The old man gazed at Thebe, gestured with his hands in a peculiar manner, then took his sheep and walked away. At the highest elevation, an ancient fort built by the Moors allowed one to glimpse Africa. That afternoon, Melchizedek, the king of Salem, sat upon the fort's wall, feeling love wash over him as the wind blew against his face. The sheep, fidgeting nearby and uneasy with their new master, were eager for food and water. Melchizedek observed the small vessel making its way from the harbor, knowing he would never see the boy again, just as he had lost sight of Abraham after sending him on his mission. Such is his duty. The gods had a void of desires because they lacked personal legends. Yet the king of Salem earnestly wished for Thebe's success. "It's unfortunate he will soon forget my name," he mused. "When he speaks of me, he willingly refer to me as the king of Salem." He gazed toward the heavens, feeling somewhat embarrassed. I recognize his vanity upon vanity, as he said, "My lord. But even an old king must take pride in himself sometimes." How strange Africa seemed to the boy. He sat in a bar reminiscent of the ones that lined the narrow alleys of Tangier. Men were puffing on a large pipe that was frequently exchanged amongst them. Within just a few hours, he observed men strolling with their arms intertwined and women whose faces were hidden behind intricate veils, engaging in the ceremonial display of tapas while others knelt in prayer. He mused himself about the infidels, a thought that juxtaposed against his faith as he gazed at the image of Saint Santiago Matamoros on his white steed. Sword in hand and the figures kneeling in reverence at his feet, the boy felt profoundly isolated. The infidels bore a sinister appearance, and amid his hurried travels, he had overlooked a crucial detail that could jeopardize his quest for treasure. Only Arabic was spoken in this land. The bar owner approached, and the boy gestured toward a drink served at a nearby table, which turned out to be better than he anticipated. Though he favored wine, it wasn't his primary concern at that moment. His focus was solely on the treasure and how to acquire it. The sale off a sheep had left him with sufficient money in his pouch, and he was aware of the magic that money held. It ensured that no one truly remained alone. Soon, perhaps within days, he would stand before the pyramids. An elderly man adorned with a gold breastplate wouldn't exist merely to talk about omens and signs. As a boy traversed the street, thoughts of omens filled his mind. The old man had indeed spoken wisely. Living in the fields taught him to discern which path to follow by observing the earth and the heavens. He had learned to recognize the signs of snakes' presence and the troubles I'd often heralded. He knew there was water nearby. A lesson imparted him that if God could guide sheep so expertly, he could equally guide a man. This realization brought him comfort and alleviated his sense of solitude. Suddenly he was approached by a voice speaking Spanish, questioning about omens. A young man appeared, dressed in Western attire, his skin color indicating he hailed from a different place. He was nearly the same age and height as the boy, and most people around them converse in Spanish. After all, they were only a couple of hours from Spain. The young man offered to buy him a drink, prompting the boy to request a glass of wine, expressing that he hated feeling alone in this unfamiliar country. The man mentioned that local religion prohibits it. The boy then informed him that he needed to reach the pyramids. He nearly divulged details about his treasure but thought better of it, revealing too much might lead to demands for a share as payment for assistance. He recalled the old man's advice about giving something that you don't actually possess. "I would appreciate it if you could take mether. I can compensate you for your service to my God. Are you familiar with the route?" the newcomer asked. The boy noticed that the bar owner was standing close by, listening intently to their discussion. He felt uncomfortable with the man's proximity but recognized the importance of seizing the opportunity. "You need to traverse the entire Sahara Desert," the young man explained, "and for that you require funds. I need to ascertain what resources you have." The boy found his inquiry unusual, yet had faith that the old man's wisdom was sound. If one truly desires something, the universe often aligns to assist. He took out his money from his pouch, displaying it to the young man. The bar owner approached and observed as well. The two conversed briefly in Arabic, and the bar owner displayed signs of annoyance. "Let's leave," the newcomer urged. The owner wanted them to exit. The newcomer only needed to settle the bill, but the owner grasped his arm and unleashed a barrage of angry words. Though the boy felt a surge of strength and a desire to retaliate, he was aware of his status as a foreigner. His new companion shoved the bar owner aside and led the boy out, advising him. "He only wanted your money. Tenure differs from the rest of Africa. Every port has its own issues." The boy trusted his new ally, who had helped him escape a precarious predicament. Counting his funds, he considered their potential route to the pyramids, estimating that they could arrive by the next day. "You need to buy 2 camels, the other said, taking the money. They walked together through the narrow streets of Tangier, surrounded by vendors selling various wares. They arrived at the heart of a large plaza where the market was bustling with life. Thousands of people were engaged in arguments, sales, and purchases, with vegetables displayed alongside daggers and carpets interspersed with tobacco. The boy remained watchful of his new friend, conscious that all his money was with him. He contemplated asking for the cash back but deemed it impolite, unfamiliar with the customs of this strange land. He resolved to observe quietly, reminding himself his own strength relative to his companion. Suddenly, amidst the bustling chaos, he spotted the most exquisite sword he had ever laid eyes on. The scabbard gleamed with silver embossed, and the handle was adorned with exquisite stones, though it remained unmarked. The boy vowed that upon his return from Egypt, he would purchase that sword from the stall owner. He then asked his friend about the sword's price, only to realize he had momentarily lost focus. Entranced by the weapon's hard elegance, it felt as if his heart had suddenly tightened, and he hesitated to look away, knowing well what he might discover. He continued to admire the stunning sword until he found the bravery to glance back around. The market buzz of shoppers mingling and a medley of unfamiliar food aromas filled the air, yet he found no sign of his new companion. The boy wished to think that his friend had simply wandered away unintentionally. He decided to remain right where he was, waiting for his return. As headed, a priest ascended a nearby tower, and the marketplace fell to its knees, touching the ground as they began to chant. Like a colony of ants, the vendors dismantled their stalls and departed. The sun started his descent, and the boy observed its path until it vanished behind the white houses encircling the plaza. He remembered that on that very morning he stood on another continent, a shepherd with 60 sheep, eagerly anticipating meeting a girl. That day he felt he knew exactly what the future held. Ash walked through familiar fields, but now at sunset he found himself in a foreign land, struggling with language he couldn't comprehend. He was no longer a shepherd and possessed nothing, not even fun to return home and start anew. This transformation unfolded between sunrise and sunset, and he found himself feeling miserable, lamenting how his life had altered so suddenly and dramatically. Overwhelmed with shame, he felt tears welling up, an emotion he had never shown even in front of his sheep. The marketplace stood deserted, and he was far from home, drenched with feeling. He questioned why God could be so unjust, believing this was how divinity rewarded those who dared to pursue their dreams. When he tended his sheep, he was content, bringing joy to those around him. Now he thought grimly that he felt sad and isolated, fearing that he might grow bitter and mistrustful of others due to one betrayal. He contemplated harboring resentment for those who had discovered their treasures when he never found his. He resolved to cling tightly to what little he possessed, convinced he was too insignificant to conquer the world. He opened his pouch to assess his belongings. Left behind were his belongings, perhaps a bit reminiscent of the sandwich. It was essential to know the ship, but all he discovered was a hefty book and the 2 stones the old man had gifted him. As he gazed at the stones, an unexplained sense of relief washed over him. He had traded 6 sheep for 2 valuable gems that had once adorned a gold breastplate. He could sell the stones to buy a return ticket, but this time he resolved to be wiser. The boy thought to himself as he removed them from the pouch, placing him securely in his pocket. This was a port town, and the only thing his friend had told him accurately was that port towns were rife with opportunity. Now he comprehended why the baroner had been so disturbed. He was attempting to warn him. He was reminded not to place his faith in the notion that, unlike others, I perceive reality solely based on my desires rather than what truly exists. He ran his fingers gently over stones, gauging their warmth and texture. They were his treasures, objects that brought him comfort. They serve as a reminder, the old man's words. When one fervent lights ear something, the universe aligns to assist in its attainment. He pondered the essence of this wisdom while standing in an empty market, devoid of recognition and uninfluenced by the night. Yet stones stood as evidence of his encounter with the king. The ruler, aware of the boy's journey, the king had urged him to learn to interpret signs, and so the boy returned the stones to the pouch, choosing to conduct an experiment. The old man had advised him to pose precise inquiries, requiring the boy to first grasp his true aspirations. Thus he sought to determine if the old man's blessing continued to linger with him. He retrieved 1 stone and fervently inquired if he would indeed uncover his fortune. As he probed the pouch to locate another stone, both slipped through a breach and tumbled to the ground. The boy had never noticed a tear in his pouch before, but there they lay. He had intended to restore them to safety. Yet the momentary sight of them on the ground sparked the notion to learn to recognize and eat omens, as the king had suggested. A smile crept across the boy's face as he picked up the 2 stones, placing them back into pouch without a thought of repairing the hole. He understood that there were specific matters one should inquire about, ensuring not to stray from one's personal legend. He reassured himself of his commitment to make his own choices. But the stones reassured him that the old man was still with him, boosting his confidence. Scanning the empty plaza once more, he felt less despair. This wasn't an alien place, but instead a novel one. Ultimately, what he desired most was experience of new surroundings. Regardless of whether he reached the pyramids, he had already journeyed further than any shepherd he knew. Oh, if only they understood how dramatically different life was just 2 hours by ship from their current spot. He mused, even though his newfound world was merely an unoccupied marketplace. one he had previously witnessed overflowing with vitality. He knew he would never forget that memory, to reflect on things but had never encountered an unlike it before. He contemplated and understood he needed to decide whether to view himself as the unfortunate victim or as an adventurer seeking his own treasure island. He considered himself a treasure-seeking adventurer. He was jolted awake by someone as he had dozed off in the marketplace, and the activity in the plaza was about to resume. As he surveyed the surroundings, he spotted a sheep and quickly recognized he was in a new world. Rather than feeling sorrowful, he felt joy. He no longer had to search for sustenance and water for the sheep but could instead pursue his treasure. While he possessed no riches in his pocket, he was armed with faith. He had resolved the night before that he would embrace the role of an adventurer, just like the ones he read about in books. He strolled towards a market where the merchants were setting up their stalls, and he assisted the candy seller in preparing his. The candy seller greeted him with a smile, clearly enthusiastic about the day's work ahead. This reminded the boy of the wise old man he had met, the mysterious king. The candy merchant crafted sweets to eventually enable his travels or to marry a shopkeeper's daughter, motivated by his own desires. The boy recognized he could follow the old man's path, regardless of how close or distant someone was to their personal legends. It was evident just by observing them. He thought about how he had never engaged in this before. Once the stall was ready, the candy seller offered the boy the first sweet of the day, which he gratefully accepted and went on his way. After walking a little distance, he realized that while setting up the stall, one merchant had spoken Arabic and the other Spanish. Yet they communicated seamlessly. There must be a language that transcends words, the boy pondered, recalling his past experiences with Margie and experiencing it again himself. He was gaining insights into various new concepts, many of which he had encountered before but had never truly noticed. He hadn't acknowledged him due to his familiarity. He realized that if he could learn to grasp this wordless language, he could decipher the world around him. With a sense of calm and without haste, he decided he would navigate the narrow streets of Tangier. Only then could he interpret the omens that surrounded him. He understood that this would demand a great deal of patience, but shepherds are well versed in the virtue of patience. Ansamor found himself applying the same teachings in an unfamiliar land. The old man remarked that with the sheep everything is interconnected. The crystal merchant awakened with the dawn, experiencing the same unease he felt each morning. He had been stationed in the same spot for 3 decades at a shop perched on a sloping street where few customers wandered by. Now it was too late to alter his fate. The sole skill he had acquired was a buying and selling of crystal glassware. There had been a time when numerous customers frequented his store, including many merchants, French and English geologists, and well-off German soldiers. It had been a delightful experience to sell crystal, and he envisioned a future filled with wealth and stunning women by his side as he aged. However, as time went by, Tangier transformed. The neighboring city of Kuta expanded more rapidly than Tangier, and his business dwindled as neighbors departed, leaving only a handful of small shops on the hill. Noah was destined to ascend the hill Marilito peruse those shops, yet crystal merchant felt trapped in his 30 years of trading crystal and believed it was too late to choose a new path. He spent the entire morning watching the rare movements in the street, having learned the routine of everyone who passed by over the years. Just before noon, a boy halted in front of the shop dressed ordinarily, but the discerning gaze of the crystal merchant revealed that the boy lacked money. Nevertheless, the merchant opted to postpone his lunch for a few minutes as the boy lingered. A sign hanging in the doorway indicated that several languages were spoken in the shop. The boy noticed a man emerged from behind the counter. "I can clean the glasses in the window if you'd like," proposed a boy. "As they are now, no one will want to purchase them." The man regarded him in silence, prompting the boy to suggest, "In return, you could give me something to eat." Still, the man remained mute, and the boy understood that a decision was imminent. In his pouch he carried his jacket, which he certainly would need in the desert. Extracting the jacket, he began to wipe the glasses. Within half an hour he had cleaned all the glasses in the window, and as he worked, 2 customers entered the shop and purchased some crystal. Upon completing his task, he requested something to eat from the man. "Let's go have lunch," said the crystal merchant, placing a sign on the door before they headed to a nearby cafe. One seated at the only table in the establishment, the crystal merchant chuckled, saying, "You didn't need do any cleaning." The boy replied, "The Quran requires me to." "Why did you let me do it?" the boy inquired. "Because the crystal was unclean and both of us needed to rid our minds of negativity," the merchant replied. After they finished eating, the merchant addressed a boy. "I'd like you to assist in my shop. 2 customers arrived while you were working, and that's a positive sign. People often speak a lot about aiding the homeless, but they truly have little understanding. For years I realized that I was communicating without words to my sheep. Do you wish to work for me?" The merchant continued, "I can put you to work for the remainder of the day." Thebe retorted, "I'll labor all night until dawn cleaning every crystal in your shop in return. I need funds to reach Egypt by tomorrow." The merchant remarked, "Even if you clean my crystals for a whole year and earned a solid commission for selling every piece, you would still have to borrow money for your journey to Egypt. There are thousands of kilometers of desert lying in between." A profound silence enveloped the moment. as if the city itself had entered a deep slumber. No sounds resonated from the bazaars, no disputes among merchants, no men scaling towers to call out, and no hope or adventure lingered. The essence of kings, personal legends, treasure, and pyramids faded away. The world appeared to hold his breath, leaving the boy's spirit staring blankly at the cafe door, wishing to fade away with a desire that everything would vanish. The merchant eyed the boy with concern. The joy witnessed that morning had abruptly vanished. "I can provide the funds you need to return to your homeland, my son," the crystal merchant stated. The boy remained silent, rose, adjusted his attire, and grabbed his pouch. "I will work for you," he said, followed by another lengthy silence. "However, I need money to purchase some sheep." Part 2. For nearly a month the boy had been employed by the crystal merchant. It was clear that this was not the type of job that would bring him happiness. The merchant spent his days murmuring behind the counter, urging the boy to handle the pieces cautiously and avoid any breakage. Nevertheless, the position was acceptable as the merchant, despite his irritable nature, treated him fairly. The boy received a decent commission for each piece sold and managed to save a little money in the process. That morning he performed some calculations. If he continued to work each day in the same manner, he would require an entire year to save enough to buy sheep. "Could you create a display case of the crystal?" the boy suggested the merchant, referring to a piece he wanted to place outside and draw on individuals passing by at the foot of the hill. "I have never owned anything like that before," the merchant noted as people moved above it, resulting in fragments becoming dislodged. "When I herd off my sheep in the pasture, some might have perished if we had encountered them, but that's just how existence unfolds, including for shepherds." The merchant redirected his attention to a customer who had requested 3 crystal glasses he was selling more successfully than he ever had before, reminiscent of a time when the street was one of the top attractions a decade ago. "Business has genuinely improved," he told the boy after the patron departed. "I'm thriving more and soon you'll be back in Hershey. Why seek more out of life?" "Because we must eat signs," the boy replied almost reflexively, regretting the remark as the merchant had never met the king. This concept is known as a principle of favorability or beginner's luck, suggesting that life wants you to realize your personal legends. The merchant perceived the significance of the boy's presence in the shop as an omen. And as time went by, with cash pouring into the drawer, he felt no remorse for hearing the boy, paying him more than his worth due to the market's assumption that sales would yield much for the boy at a high commission. He believed he would soon return to tending sheep. "Why are you so eager to reach the pyramids?" he asked, wanting to escape the business of display. "Because I've always longed to see them," the boy replied, omitting any mention of his dream. The treasure now felt like nothing more than a painful recollection that he tried not to dwell on. "I don't know anyone around here who would be inclined to traverse the desert simply to view the pyramids," the merchant remarked. "You could build a replica in your backyard with those stones. You've never had aspirations of traveling?" the boy asked as he turned to serve a customer who was about to enter the shop. 2 days later the merchant discussed a display with the boy. "I'm not fond of change," he stated. "You and I are different from that affluent merchant. If he makes an error in purchasing, it hardly impacts him, but we must live with our errors." "That's certainly true," the boy thought with a tinge of regret. "Assuming you believe we should proceed with the display, I want to return to tending sheep more swiftly. We must capitalize on the fact that luck is in our favor and is equally inclined to aid you as it is aiding us. This is referred to as the principle of favorability or beginner's luck." The merchant paused for a moment in silence, before stating that the prophet gave us the obligation of just 5 responsibilities to fulfill during our journey. The essence of life is to have faith solely in the one true God. Other significant practices include praying 5 times daily, fasting during Ramadan, and being generous towards those in need. As he spoke, tears welled in his eyes. He was a devoted man, and despite his impatience, he desired to lead his life in adherence to Islamic law. The boy inquired about the 5th obligation. The merchant responded 2 days prior that he had never envisioned embarking on a journey. He continued to explain that the 5th duty for every Muslim is to make a pilgrimage, a requirement to visit the holy city of Mecca at least once in a lifetime. Mecca is considerably farther than the pyramids. When he was younger, his sole ambition was to save enough money to open a shop. He believed that wealth would afford him the chance to reach Mecca. He began earning some income, yet could never bring himself to entrust anyone with the shop as the crystals required delicate handling. Concurrently, many people frequently passed by a store on their way to Mecca, some of whom were wealthy pilgrims traveling in caravans accompanied by servants and camels. However, the majority of the pilgrims were impoverished. Those who traveled were joyful, and upon completing their pilgrimage they marked their doors with symbols. One man, a cobbler who earned his living repairing boots, mentioned that he journeyed nearly a year across the desert. He worked diligently and walked the streets of Tangier with the hope of reaching Mecca. The boy now asked why the cobbler ventured there. The answer lay in the profound significance of Mecca that sustains him. It provides the strength to endure the monotonous days filled with silent crystals on the shelves and the same dreaded meals at the cafe. He feared that achieving history might leave him without purpose. "While you dream of your sheep in the pyramids, which are distinct from my aspirations, I only wish to envision Mecca's grandeur and the countless occurrences across in the desert, reaching the sacred stone, and circling it 7 times before allowing myself to touch it. I have already imagined who would be beside me, those in front, and all the conversations and prayers exchanged. Yet I worry that it might all become a routine, so I choose to only envision that day. The merchant allowed the boy to create the display, explaining that not everyone has the same opportunity to see their dreams materialize. 2 months rolled by and the shelf attracted numerous customers to the crystal shop. The boy calculated that if he worked for another 6 months before return to Spain, and then continue to save for the next 60 days, in under a year he could potentially double his flock. He was eager to engage and trade with raps as he had gained the ability to communicate in their unusual tongue. Since that day in the marketplace, he had completely abandoned the plan to return, for Egypt now felt as remote a fantasy to him as Mecca was to the merchant. Regardless, the boy found joy in his work, and often reflected on the moment we landed victorious. One must always be aware of their desires, and the boy was now clear on his goals, striving for treasures in a foreign land. He had doubled his flock without any expenditure, and he felt a sense of pride. He had acquired valuable insights in trading crystal, the unspoken language, and the significance of omens. One afternoon, he observed Ammon at the hilltop lamenting the difficulty in finding a decent drink. Accustomed to recognizing omens, the boy conversed with a merchant who informed the visitors that they could offer crystal glasses that would enhance the enjoyment of tea and entice purchases. The merchant, who had claimed that beauty captivates men, remained silent. Later that day, after offering his prayers and closing the shop, he invited the boy to join him and share his peculiar pipe, a custom among the raps. "What is it that you seek?" the old merchant asked. "I've already mentioned that I must buy my sheep back, so I need to earn the money for that," responded the boy. The merchant inhaled deeply from his pipe and said, "Having operated this shop for 30 years, I could discern high-quality crystal from inferior, and I understand everything regarding crystal's properties. If we serve tea and crystal, the shop will grow, necessitating a shift in my lifestyle. Is that beneficial? I'm accustomed to how things are now, before your arrival. I often ponder at how much time I squandered in the same spot while my peers either faced bankruptcy or prospered. This thought left me despondent. However, I now realize things haven't been as bad as they seemed. The shop is the exact size I envisioned. I'm reluctant to transform anything because I lack the skills to handle change. I prefer my current routine." The boy was at a loss for words. The old man continued, "You have been a true blessing to me today. I have come to comprehend something previously overlooked. Every ignored blessing eventually turns into a curse. I yearn for nothing more in life, yet you compel me to confront affluence and vistas previously unknown to me. Now that I have encountered these opportunities and recognized the vastness of my potential, I find myself feeling worse than I did prior to your presence. I am aware of the goals I ought to pursue, yet I am reluctant to embark on that path." It was wise of me to hold back my words from the baker, and Teresa thought to himself as they continued to smoke the pipe while the sun dipped below the horizon. They engaged in Arabic conversation, and the boy felt a sense of pride in his ability to communicate in that language. A fleeting notion crossed his mind that, if she could impart all the necessary knowledge of the world, she would, but they could never reveal to him the likely lessons the sheep could teach him. The boy regarded the old merchant, pondering that their primary aim was merely to seek sustenance and water. Perhaps it wasn't about them instructing me, but rather me gaining insights from them. Finally, the merchant spoke to the boy, conveying that understanding such a concept required one to be born into it. In simpler terms, it translates to something akin to, "It is written," while he tended to the coals. The merchant told the boy he could start to serve in the crystal glasses. At times, one cannot restrain the flow of a river. They ascended the hill weary by the time they arrived at the summit, but were met with a crystal shop offering invigorating mint tea. They entered to partake, and the tea was presented in exquisite crystal glasses. My wife never envisioned this set. It was purchased for hosting guests that evening. How would surely be captivated by the elegance of the glassware. Another remarked that the tea always tasted better when served in crystal, as it preserved the aroma. A third mentioned it was customary in the East to use crystal glasses for tea due to their mystical properties. Before long, word spread and many began to ascend the hill to visit the shop that was reviving an age-old trade. Other establishments sold tea in crystal as well, but they were not situated at top a hill and saw little patronage. Ultimately, the merchant found it necessary to hire 2 additional employees as he began to import vast amount of tea, and his crystal shop became a destination for those eager for new experiences. Thus the months went by. The boy woke before dawn. It had been 11 months and 9 days since he last set foot on the African continent. He donned his Arabian attire. On this particular day, he donned white linen, viewed especially a headcloth secured with a ring crafted from camel skin. Slipping into his new sandals, he ascended the stairs quietly while the city remained in slumber. He prepared a sandwich and poured himself hot tea from a crystal glass, then settled in the sunlit doorway to smoke in silence, with thoughts at a standstill as he listened to the wind-carrying whispers from the heart of the desert. Once he finished his cigarette, he reached into his pocket, pausing for a moment to examine what he had pulled out. It was a bundle of money sufficient to purchase his flock and secure a license for importing African goods into his own land. He waited patiently for merchant to arrive and open a shop, and then they ventured off together for Mordia. "I am departing today," the boy announced. "I possess the funds to buy my sheep and you have Themians to journey to Mecca." The old man remained silent. "Will you grant me your blessing?" inquired Thebo. "You have aided me." The man continued preparing his tea without responding. Finally he turned to the boy, stating, "I am proud of you. You have infused new life into my crystal shop, yet you are aware that I won't be going to Mecca just as you realize you will not buy your sheep." "Told you that?" the startled boy asked. The old crystal merchant smiled and bestowed the boy his blessing. The boy entered his room and started gathering his things as he felt 3 sacks. While departing, he noticed an old shepherd's pouch tucked away in the corner, something he hadn't considered for ages. As he removed his jacket from the pouch to possibly give it to someone on the street, 2 stones fell to the floor with a clink, prompting memories of the old king and making him realize how long it had been since he thought of him. For nearly a year, he had been tirelessly focused on saving money to return to Spain with dignity, all while keeping his dreams alive. The old king had taught him to heed the omens. The boy picked up the stones again and felt that same peculiar presence of the old king close by. He had worked hard for a whole year and the signs indicated it was time for him to depart. "I think I will return to my previous life," the boy mused, reflecting on how the sheep had taught him Arabic, yet they imparted something even more vital, the universal language understood by all. This was a language of passion, of achievements rooted in love and intention, a key component in pursuit of something truly meaningful. He no longer found the city intimidating, feeling that he could conquer the world just as he had mastered this place. The old king had declared that when you desire something intensely, the universe aligns to assist you in achieving it. However, the old king had failed to mention anything about being stuck, about endless deserts, or about individuals who are aware of their dreams yet hesitate to bring them to life. He hadn't advised that the pyramids were merely heaps of stones, or that anyone to construct one in their backyard. Nor had he mentioned that once you acquire enough funds to expand beyond your previous flock, you should do so. Boy gathered the pouch with his belongings, made his way downstairs and encountered the merchant attending to a foreign couple, while 2 other patrons leisurely sipped tea from crystal glasses. It was more bustling than usual for that early hour. From his vantage point, the merchant's hair resembled that of the old king. Here recalled the smile of the candy seller on his initial day in tenure when he had no food and nowhere to turn. That smile too had mirrored the old king's, as if he left an indelible impression. And yet none of these individuals has ever encountered the elderly monarch who claimed he consistently appeared to assist those pursuing their personal legends. You departed without bidding farewell to the crystal merchant as he wished to avoid shedding tears among those who would miss the place and all the valuable lessons it offered. He felt an increased sense of self-assurance and believed he could take on the world. However, he remarked that he would return to familiar fields to look after his flock again, stating this with assurance. Yet he found no joy in that choice anymore, having dedicated a full year fulfilling a dream that with each passing moment seemed less significant. Perhaps it was not truly a dream at all. Who can say? Maybe it's preferable to live like the crystal merchant, never venture into Mecca but rather traversing life with aspirations. He contemplated once more, attempting to reassure himself, and as Heck glazed a crystal that had been bestowed upon him, he felt the old king's strength and determination flow through him. Serendipity or perhaps an omen crossed his mind when he arrived at Hebar. On his initial day there, the thief was absent and the establishment's owner served him a cup of tea. "I can revert to being a shepherd at any time," he thought, reminding himself he had learned how to tend his sheep and had not forgotten those skills. Yet he wondered if he would ever have another opportunity to visit the pyramids in Egypt. The old man wore a breastplate of gold and seemed to understand his background. He truly was a wise king. The hills of Andalusia lay just 2 hours away, but an entire desert stood between him and the pyramids. Still, the boy perceived his circumstance differently. He was actually 2 hours closer to his treasure. The 2 hours that had stretched into a whole year wearing consequential. "I know I want to return to my flock," he thought. "I recognize this is a dilemma anymore, they can remain good companions." On the other hand, he questioned whether the desert could be Afrin, but it was there they needed to seek his treasure. If he did not discover it, he could always return home. He finally had sufficient funds and all the time he required. Why not? Suddenly he felt an overwhelming surge of joy. He could always revert to shepherding or even become a crystal merchant again. Perhaps the world contained other hidden treasures, but he had a dream, and his encounter with the king was not something that just occurred to anyone. As he departed the bar, he recollected that one of the crystal merchant suppliers transported his crystals via caravans that traversed the desert. The agreement was clasped tightly in his grasp due to those 2 stones, and he found himself once again on the path to his treasure. "I am perpetually present whenever someone seeks to fulfill their personal legend," the old king remarked, discussing the cost of venturing to supplier's warehouse to verify whether the parents were indeed that distant. The Englishman rested on a bench within a structure that reeked of animal sweat and dust. It was a hybrid of a warehouse and corral. He had never imagined finding himself in a location like this, believing he would be immersed in the pages of a scholarly journal continuing at the university. Yet here was in a corral. Nevertheless, he had to press forward. He held a lifelong belief in omens, directing all high studies toward uncovering the universe's singular true language. His journey began with Esperanto, then progressed to the world's religions, and now he delved into alchemy. He was capable of conversing in Esperanto and had a solid grasp of all significant faiths, but he had yet to achieve the status of an alchemist. He had unraveled truths behind critical queries, yet his studies had reached a plateau that he could not surpass. He attempted in vain to forge a connection with an alchemist, but they were peculiar individuals who primarily concerned themselves with personal interests and almost always denied him assistance. Perhaps their inability to uncover the secret of the masterwork, the Philosopher's Stone, caused him to hoard their knowledge. He had often been relying on the fortune left to him by his father in his unfruitful quest for Philosopher's Stone. Countless hours have been spent in vast libraries of the world acquiring the rarest and most significant texts on alchemy. One volume he encountered many years ago featured a renowned Arabian alchemist who claimed to have unearthed the Philosopher's Stone and the elixir of life at the remarkable age of over 200 years. The Englishman was deeply moved by the tale but had never considered it more than a mere story. However, a friend returning from an archaeological expedition in the desert relayed that there was an individual who possessed extraordinary abilities. This person resided in an oasis, his friend claimed, and people whispered that he too was 200 years old and could transmute any metal into gold. The Englishman struggled to suppress his enthusiasm. He cancelled all his commitments and gathered his most essential books. As he sat within the dusty-smelling warehouse, preparations were made for caravans destined to cross the Sahara. He was determined to locate that elusive alchemist, he thought, as the scent of the animals became slightly more bearable. A young traveler, also burdened with baggage, entered and greeted the Englishman. "Where are you headed?" asked the young traveler. "Into the desert," he replied. The man responded, returning to his reading, clearly uninterested in any dialogue at that moment. What was essential for him was to reflect on everything he had absorbed over the years, as the alchemist would likely challenge him. The young rabbit extracted a book in common seed reading. The text was in Spanish. That's a valid consideration. English speakers often handle Spanish better than Arabic, and if this was going to be a significant volume, it could become a worthwhile discussion partner when other important tasks were absent. "Strange," the boy remarked, attempting once more to focus on the burial scene that opened the book. For 2 years, he had been trying to navigate the initial pages of this book. Yet even without a king present to interrupt him, concentration eluded him. He still held uncertainties about the choices he had made. Booth realized one fundamental truth: making a decision served only as the starting point. When a person commits to something, it feels like plunging into a powerful current that sweeps them to destinations they never envisioned when they first chose their path. Reflecting back when he made the choice to pursue his treasure, he never anticipated it would lead him to a crystal shop. He pondered that although the decision to board this caravan was his own, where it would ultimately take him remained a mystery. Nearby, the Englishman perused a book. He appeared unapproachable, even somewhat annoyed when the boy walked in. They might have struck up a friendship, but the Englishman dismissed any opportunity for conversation. The boy shut his book, feeling reluctant to do anything that might cause him to resemble the Englishman. He pulled out a small object from his pocket and started playing with it until the stranger called out. In a swift movement, Hare returned the object to his pocket. "They're not for sale," he stated. The Englishman replied, "That amount is quite trivial. They are merely rock crystals," he continued. "There are countless rock crystals, but those who are knowledgeable would recognize that these are from this region." "They were gifted to him," the boy responded. The stranger didn't reply right away. Instead, he reached into his pocket and produced 2 stones identical to the boy's. "Did you mention a king?" he inquired. "I suppose you don't think a king would converse with someone like me?" a shepherd. He wanted to end a discussion there. "Not all shepherd are overlooked. Some are the first to acknowledge truths that the rest of the world refuses to see. So it's plausible that a king might speak with shepherds," he continued. Uncertain whether the boy would grasp his points. "This is in the Bible, the same book that enlightened me about the sacred stones, which are the only means of divination. Authorized by God, the priest carries them within a golden breastplate, and he was undoubtedly pleased to be present at the warehouse. Perhaps this signifies an omen. The Englishman have informed you about omens." The boy's curiosity intensified with each passing moment, as everything within life is known to a group of Englishmen. Now, while shutting the journal he'd been reading, he reflected on a universal language familiar to all but long forgotten. "I am on a quest to discover that universal language among other pursuits, and that's the reason for my presence here. I must locate an individual versed in that universal language." The alchemist's dialogue was cut short by the warehouse bell. "You're fortunate," said a representative. "This caravan departs today for Alvlan, but I'm bound to Egypt," the boy remarked. "Alvlan lies within Egypt," the representative noted. "Best of luck," the Englishman commented. Once the representative had exited, "If I could compile an extensive encyclopedia solely about the concept of luck and coincidence, it would be expressed through those terms. He conveyed to the boy that their meeting was not mere chance. Holding the Book of Omens, he inquired that the boy was also pursuing the alchemist. "I seek a treasure," said the boy, instantly wishing he hadn't shared that detail. Yet the Englishman seemed unfazed. "I don't even know what alchemy is," the boy was about to say when the warehouse bell beckoned him to step outside. The caravan's leader, a dark-bearded man, asserted that he held dominion over life and death for all travelers. "The desert is a fickle mistress, and at times it drives me to madness," he declared. Nearly 200 people had assembled, accompanied by 400 animals including camels, horses, mules, and poultry. Among the crowd were women, children, and several men tightening their belts and slinging rifles over their shoulders. The Englishman was burdened with multiple suitcases packed with books, creating a cacophony that necessitated the leader to repeat himself repeatedly for clarity. "There are various individuals here, each worshipping their own deity, but I serve the law. In his name I vow to exert all effort once more to conquer the desert. However, I require each of you to pledge by the God you revere that you will adhere to my commands without fail, for in the desert insubordination can be fatal." A quiet hum rose in the crowd, each individual making their vow to their respective God. The boy quietly offered his allegiance to Jesus Christ, while the Englishman remained silent, and the murmuring persisted longer than a mere word would have. The group was also entreating heavens for assistance. The sounding of protection note echoed through the air as the bugle played, prompting everyone to mount their camels. The boy observed that the Englishman had brought his own camel and awkwardly climbed aboard. Feeling a pang of sympathy for the Englishman, the boy noted how the creature was burdened with heavy cases of books. "There is no such thing as coincidence," remarked the Englishman, attempting to strike up a conversation, though his words were cut short in the bustling warehouse. "I'm here because a friend of mine is in red," he continued. But the caravan soon began to move, making it difficult for Theboy to hear the rest of the Englishman's thoughts. Boy anticipated an explanation about the enigmatic connection linking events. The same connection that led him to become a shepherd sparked his recurring dream and guided him to Africa in search of a king, culminating in his encounter with the crystal merchant. He realized that as one draws close to fulfilling their personal legend, that legend crystallizes into their genuine purpose. The caravan journeyed eastward, traversing the desert under the midday sun, and then continuing in the late afternoon. The boy engaged in minimal conversation with the Englishman, who was engrossed in his books, opting instead to silently watch the movement of the animals and people across the vast desert. This scene starkly contrasted with the chaotic departure he witnessed when David had set out. Back then, there have been confusion, shouts, and excited cries of children mingling with the frantic commands of guides and merchants. Now in the desert, only the relentless wind and the footsteps of the animals broke the silence. The guide spoke sparingly as they traversed the sand. Yet on one occasion a camel driver remarked, "The desert is immense and the distant horizon makes a person feel small," urging silence. The boy intuitively grasped the sentiment despite never having been to the desert. He recalled how the sight of the sea or fire often left them speechless, eyed by such elemental forces. He thought about the lessons he'd learned from the sheet and the knowledge gained from crystal, contemplating that the desert too seemed ancient and wise. The wind was unceasing, evoking memories of the day he sat at the fort in Teresa with the same breeze brushing against his face, reminiscent of the solace found in his former life on the sheep farm in Andalusia, where they consistently search for food and water. "Those aren't my sheep anymore," he told himself, devoid of nostalgia. "They've likely grown accustomed to their new shepherd and may have already forgotten me." He found comfort in the notion that creatures like sheep, familiar with travel, inherently understand the importance of moving on. Thoughts of the merchant's daughter crossed his mind, and felt certain she had likely married, perhaps to a baker or someone else entirely. To another shepherd who could read until her thrilling tales, as he likely wasn't the only one. His intuitive grasp of the camel drivers thrilled him. Perhaps he was also discovering the universal language that encompasses the past and present of humanity. His mother referred to it as hunches. The boy began to realize that intuition represents a sudden immersion into the universal current of life, indicating that the histories of all individuals are intertwined, allowing us to comprehend everything since it is all documented. Tum Theboy recalled thinking of the crystal merchant. The desert was challenging, with some terrains rugged and others obstructed by boulders requiring a diversion. In the presence of large rocky areas, significant detours were necessary. When the sand was too fine, the animals struggled with their loads and sought refuge. In certain spots, the ground was encrusted with salt, and both the animals and caravan drivers had to dismount and relieve their burdens. The drivers maneuvered through such risky terrains before loading their camels. If God were to fall ill or perish, the camel drivers would draw lots to select a successor. Yet all of this transpired for a singular fundamental reason. Despite the numerous detours and modifications, the caravan consistently progressed toward the same compass point. Once the obstacles were surmounted, it returned to its trajectory. Focus on a star that signified the oasis location. When people spotted the star gleaming in the morning sky, they understood they remained on the correct path toward the water, long trees, and fellow travelers. Only the Englishman seemed oblivious to all this, largely absorbed in his books. The boy owned the book too, attempting to read it during the initial days of the journey, but he found it far more captivating to observe the caravan and heed the whispers of the wind. Once he learned a bond with his camel, he discarded the book. The boy had come to hold a superstition that every time he opened it, he would uncover something vital. Therefore, he deemed it an unnecessary weight. He grew close to the camel driver, traveling beside him at night as they gathered around the fire. The boy shared tales of his experiences as a shepherd, and during these exchanges, the driver recounted his own life. "I used to live near Elkhart," he said. "I had my orchard, my children, and a life that would remain unchanged until my end. One year, when the harvest was outstanding, I felt it was time to fulfill the only obligation I hadn't addressed in my life, allowing me to die content. One day the ground started toxic and the Nile breached its banks. This was a calamity I believed only befell others, never me. My neighbors were anxious about losing their olive trees to the deluge, and my wife feared for the safety of her children. I was convinced that all my possessions would be obliterated. Our land lay in ruin, and I had to find alternative means to sustain myself. Consequently, I became a camel driver. That catastrophe enlightened me to all's will. People need not be daunted by the unknown, for they are capable of attaining their desirous and necessities. We often fear losing what we possess, our lives, belongings, and property. But that fear dissipates when we grasp that our life stories are collectively inscribed by the same hand. Occasionally, our caravan would encounter another, often possessing what we needed, as if everything were truly scripted by one divine hand. Gathered around the fire, the camel drivers would share insights about storms and recount tales of the desert. At times, enigmatic hooded figures would emerge. These were watchmen shoveling the caravan paths, alerting us to the threats posed by nearby savage tribes clad in black, revealing only their eyes. One night, a camel driver approached a fire in the company of Englishmen. The air carried rumors of tribal conflicts. The trio fell into a silence as the boy observed an unmistakable tension despite the absence of words. Experiencing that wordless language, the universal dialect, the Englishman inquired if they faced peril. The camel driver replied, "Once you enter the desert, retreat is impossible," emphasizing that when one can't turn back, their focus must solely rest on the most effective route ahead, with the remainder left Allah, including any perils. He finished with a curt reminder to heed the caravan closely. After the camel driver departed, the boy remarked to the Englishman that although they often took detours, they were always aiming for the same goal. The Englishman then expressed a desire to delve deeper into the world, stating that books are akin to caravans in that sense. The group of travelers began to move more swiftly, and while the camp had previously been quiet, even the nights when tribes would usually converse around the fires transformed into vibrancy. Eventually, the caravan leader decided to extinguish the fire to avoid drawing attention, and the travelers adopted this practice. Arranging the animals into a circle at night, resting together in center serves as a means of protection against nocturnal threats, with the leader assigning armed sentinels around the perimeter. One night, the Englishman was able to sleep and summon the boy for a stroll along the dunes enveloping the camp. Beneath a full moon, the boy recounted his life story, captivating the Englishman, particularly with the advancements made at the shop since the boys started working there. "That's the essence that governs everything," he remarked. "In alchemy, it's referred to as the soul of the world. When you yearn for something with your whole heart, you are nearest to the soul of the world, which is always a positive force." He also noted that this gift is not exclusive to humans. Everything on earth possesses a soul, whether it be mineral, vegetable, or animal, and even simple thoughts have their essence. Continuous transformation is inherent to all life on earth because it is alive and hold a soul of which we are part. This often goes unnoticed. Yet in the crystal shop, one might observe that even the classes contribute to your success. The boy pondered these thoughts while gazing at the moonlit sands and watching the caravans traverse the desert. "The caravans in the desert communicate in the same language," he stated. "That's why the desert permits their passage. It will challenge each caravan at every turn to assess its timing. If we succeed, we shall reach the oasis, undertaking this journey based solely on mere bravery." Without understanding that language would make our travel significantly harder, they stood together gazing at the moon. "There are magic moments," the boy remarked. "I've watched how the men interpret the signs of the desert and how the soul of the caravan converses with the soul of the desert." The Englishman replied, "I ought to pay closer attention to the caravan," while the boy added, "And I should read your books." Though they presented strange content discussing Mercury, salt, dragons, and kings, he found himself puzzled. Yet one recurring idea resonated throughout these texts: all things are manifestations of a singular essence. He recalled that one of the books revealed that the most crucial text in alchemical literature was succinct, consisting of only a few lines etched onto an emerald surface. "That is the emerald tablet," the Englishman asserted. "Please," he could impart knowledge to the boy. "Then why we need all these books?" the boy inquired. "So can comprehend those few lines," the Englishman replied, though he did not seem entirely convinced by his own words. The book that captivated the boy recounted the tales of renowned alchemists who devoted their entire lives to refining metals. These men believed that through prolonged heating, a metal could shed all its distinct properties, leaving behind what they referred to as the soul of the world. This essence granted them the ability to comprehend anything in existence, as it served as a universal language connecting all things. They termed this revelation the masterwork, which consisted of both liquid and solid elements. Do you simply observe men in signs to grasp this language? The boy inquired. You have quite a knack for simplifying everything, responded the Englishman, expressing frustration that alchemy is a rigorous practice where every detail must be adhered precisely as taught by the masters. The boy discovered that the fluid aspect of grand work was referred to as elixir life, which had the power to heal all ailments and also prevented aging. The solid component was known as the philosopher's stone. Finding the philosopher Unc's stone is no simple task, the Englishman remarked, explaining that the alchemists spent years laboring in laboratories studying the flames. In that time near the fire, he gradually relinquished worldly desires, realizing that refining metals also brought about the refinement of the self. The boy recalled what the crystal merchant had said, that cleaning the crystal objects allowed him to liberate himself from negative thoughts. This made the boy increasingly convinced the elements of alchemy could be integrated into everyday existence. Additionally, the Englishman stated that the philosopher's stone possessed an intriguing characteristic. Even a small fragment could change vast amount of metal into gold. Inspired by this, the boy mused that perhaps with little patience, he too could convert everything into gold. He explored the lives of various individuals who had achieved such transformations. Each narrative, Elias, Fulton, Eliot, and Jeff, was captivating. All pursued their personal legends, traveled, conversed with wise figures, performed astonishing feats, and possessed a philosopher's stone along with the elixir of life. When the boy sought to uncover how to create themasterwork, he found himself utterly confounded by merely sketches, coded guidelines, and cryptic writings. Why do they complicate things so? He queried the Englishman one evening, noticing the man was irritable and yearned for his books. The Englishman replied, stating that the responsibility of understanding falls on the shoulders of the diligent, explaining that if everyone could easily turn base metal into gold, gold itself would lose its worth. It is only those who demonstrate perseverance and unwillingness to delve deeply into their studies that can attain the masterwork, thus justify his presence in the desert in search of a true alchemist who could assist him in unraveling the enigma. The boy then asked about the age of these texts, to which the Englishman responded that they were written many centuries prior, long before the invention of the printing press. The boy countered that it would have been impossible for all to know of alchemy, questioning why such peculiar languaging numerous illustrations were utilized. The Englishman didn't reply directly, choosing instead to mention that he had been observing how the caravan operated for several days, remarking that despite his observation, he had not gleaned any new insights. He noted the increasing chatter about warfare, and one day when the boy returned the books to the Englishman, the man inquired if he'd learned anything. You may be the one with the insight, the boy replied. I was in need of someone to converse with as a distraction from the looming threat of war. I discovered that the world possesses aspirate, and that those who grasp the spirit can also comprehend the essence of existence. I found out that numerous optimists have realized their own personal destinies and in doing so uncover the world's soul, the philosopher's stone, and elixir of life. Most importantly, I learned that T.